Warning, the following video contains violence towards children, such as self-inflicted abortion attempts, kidnapping, mental and physical abuse, murder and dismemberment, sexual acts on children including assault and human trafficking. Due to its violent nature, this episode is not intended for children. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey everyone, welcome to Dark Mystery Podcast, where we give a little venom for the soul. I am your host, Vetty, and today I have my reoccurring guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Vetty's bestie pestie of about 15 years, and we have, throughout our friendship, talked about true crime, and just this is just a recap of some of the stuff we talk about.
Exactly. So if you're just tuning in, this is part 2 of the Wineville chicken coop murders. So if you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend you go watch part 1. Just so you are aware, I'm sure you guys saw the warning in the beginning of the video. Please do not take that with a grain of salt, because it is very important that you guys understand that this case, it is very gruesome. But this case is very emotionally draining. It is gruesome. There are some details that were not included in my investigation on this because of, I guess, the victims did not want to share that, but either way, this one really is just very, in my opinion,
sadistic.
Yes. The first part of this episode, we covered Kristen and Walter Collins. Walter was a 9-year-old boy who went missing in LA. And we just basically covered about how LAPD were, corrupt and everything, and how there was another boy that came into the picture and it really wasn't Walter. And then it turned out that he confessed he wasn't him after Christine, the mother, was institutionalized because she called the police out. Let's just call it what it is. She called them out for their BS nonsense and whatnot. And then we also have the disappearance of the Winslow brothers, Louis, 12 years old, and Nelson, 10 years old, who they disappeared coming home from a yacht club that they attended that day. And we left off where police got a call that a Canadian immigrant boy is working here in Wineville, California, illegally. So we are going to start off where we left off, basically. So a little history of Wineville, now known as Mira Loma. So Mira Loma is part of Jurupa Valley in Riverside County. It is separated from the city of Riverside by the Santa Ana River, and it borders Fontana, Ontario, like that area. It's about 45 minutes away from Los Angeles nowadays. Back then, I'm sure it was a lot more than that. At the time, in 1920s, this all happened in the 1920s, mind you. At the time, Wineville was surrounded by desert. You would have to drive a good distance just to get to the next town. Kind of like here, like the high desert. I mean, thankfully, we live in a residential area, but it's just like the high desert, which I have some thoughts on that, which I'll get to afterwards. The land was originally granted to Señor Don Juan Bandini in September of 1838. Bandini was a well-known public figure, politician, and ranchero or rancher. Mira Loma was originally named Wineville, but was changed on November 1st, 1930, due to the following events that we will cover. Now, once again, I will remind you, the warning in the beginning, please do not take that with a grain of salt. We're about to get into a very severe case, and in my opinion, it's just one of the worst of the worst. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's not that bad. Well, when you read the books, when you do the research and everything, and you understand the severity of it, it's just horrible. It's really horrible.
It's so severe. So my husband grew up in Jurupa Valley. He is from Jurupa Valley and had never heard of this. Never.
Yeah, they really try to keep it under the hush hush. So if you guys have not watched the movie Changeling, I highly recommend you go watch it. There will be some spoiler alerts here. So if you don't want spoiler alerts, go ahead and click off, watch the movie, and then come back.
There are 2 movies called Changeling. Do not watch. Well, the older one is a horror movie, and it's really good. I mean, it's a horror classic.
That's called The Changeling, the 1980 one.
This one is Changeling with my boo, Angelina Jolie. Not my bae, my
Directed
boo.
by, directed by Clint Eastwood. I highly recommend you guys go watch it. It's a very good movie. Just keep in mind the warnings
It's
that I'm
tough.
giving you guys. Yeah, it is tough. It's particularly that one scene. Which we'll get to. I just can't, but we'll get to it. So a lot of you are probably asking, so what's the connection between Walter Collins, the Winslow brothers, and this Canadian immigrant kid in Wineville and stuff? What's going on? So Dawn, why don't you tell us what the connection is?
So, what we have, well, the police ended up going to the chicken coop farm where they found a boy who, in fact, there was illegally in the United States. He was identified as Sanford Clark, a 15-year-old Canadian immigrant. He told the police that the farm belonged to his uncle, Gordon Northcott, which we'll find more out about him in. He was not there at the time, but the police would say that Sanford was acting unusual, asking meaningless questions and would almost avoid answering questions when it came to this situation at hand. They waited for Gordon to return, but he didn't. After 2 hours, Sanford asked the police if he could trust them. Could they protect him? And of course, the police said, sure, yeah, it's our job. You kind of have to. So Sanford started talking. He told them that Gordon saw them coming from the window, and he told Sanford to stall them, that if he didn't, he would climb up a tree and shoot him. Of course, this scared Sanford. The police took Sanford to the police station, and that's when he told them the horrifying truth.
So, what is the horrifying truth? So, we're going to start with introducing Gordon Stewart Northcott. So, Gordon Stewart Northcott was born on November 9th, 1906. William died due to an illness when he was only 7 years old. It was said that the mother fell into a deep depression, which is understandably so, and George and Louise decided not to have any more children. Now, real quick, according to some reports, they were saying that he had passed away from pneumonia and some sort of like hay fever type thing. I'm not 100% sure, but the point was that he did fall ill and he passed away at the age of 7. So the parents just did not want to have any more children. And of course, they were very, very upset. So after years of passing, Louise became pregnant with Gordon. Now, she wasn't happy about this. It was said that like she was very bitter because she just did not want this child. And she would lash out at George and Louisa. And Louisa at this time, the sister, she was 18 years old at this time. And she was just so aggressive and everything. Now, there was reports that George was, in fact, abusive with Louise and Louisa, like, but according to a book, which I'll get to later, but according to a book, it would make sense that he was not abusive. It was actually her. She even tried to abort this baby on her own. She did everything in her power to try to miscarry this child. And it got so bad, like the bickering and the arguing, that George actually, he did strike her and kicked her just to kind of just get it over with. Because she was just so angry, so upset. She didn't want this baby or nothing. Like, it got to the point where she would even overwork herself. It just, she really desperately tried to miscarry this baby. So then Gordon was born afterwards. He clearly survived all that. So Gordon's parents made it pretty clear that they didn't want him from the get-go. And they were very cold towards them. It was more Louise than George was. And he was just basically born into a family who despised him. They didn't want him there. Made it very, very clear towards the beginning that he was not wanted. He was not loved or anything. So after some time, Louise actually started like getting close to him and started to love him. It got to the point where she was obsessed with him. Like he was not allowed to enter a room without her. She was just so like, oh my God, my baby. Like she took helicopter mom to an extreme level. She was just one of those women, like her boy is just, God's gift to earth, and he is like the precious angel, and she just loved him so much. And she also babied the heck out of this kid. So in one report stated that Louise would often dress Gordon in girls' clothing. Other reports claimed that it was actually him who wanted to do it, and we'll get to that. Gordon, he was known to be very flamboyant, kind of feminine, and as he grew up, he would dress very stylish. He was just really into himself. He always had to be dressed up and taken care of. Exactly. He would just do his thing, if you will. And he carried himself with confidence, and he was very outstandish, with his suits and everything, vibrant colors, all that stuff. Another feature that gave Gordon a lot of attention was that he was a very hairy person, like extremely hairy, especially his teenage years, because they go to puberty and everything, and they get more hair. So he was so hairy that he was actually given the name the Ape Man. In his late teens, he became a pianist, and he worked at bars and other small venues, and he had like a very large social life, and he was just very out there. He had a large group who did not like him. Of course, they were like haters, if you will, because just how how out there he was. Very extremely flamboyant, which we know a couple of people like that, so, and it was mainly, right? Exactly. And we went to school with a couple people like that, actually. Just saying.
I was one in my past life.
Right. But you're more humble now. So, but most of the haters, they were mainly men, because just the way he carried himself, like very feminine, very, elegant, if you will. But people did find him to be charming, and they just kind of wanted to be all around him. And he did drive a nice fancy car. I couldn't get the make and model of the exact car that he drove. But just know that it was a nice fancy car. It was
probably back then a Ford Model T, perhaps.
It probably was, and it was a convertible. I think it was like a nice yellow color. I'm not 100% sure, but it was a very, very nice car, top down and everything. And Gordon was known to take young boys out for car rides. So, and by this point, Gordon had started having these disturbing thoughts about these young boys. There's no reports of any foul play, but it can be speculated that there was foul play. However, there's nothing that we know about that. So,
yeah.
In 1924, Gordon, he was 18 at this time. Him and his family had moved to California. And by family, I mean him and his parents. The sister stayed behind. She was already married at this point, I believe, and was starting her life. They moved there because they were hoping to have better job opportunities here in LA. So Gordon, he fell in love with California lifestyle. It's really up his alley, which I hate to say, but even to this day, yes, us Californians, whether you live in the high desert, in the ranch, in Fresno, LA, it doesn't matter. We can be a little Californians, it's just a thing that we have. So
bougie.
Yeah, bougie, which it's understandable why other states hate us, but just know we're not all uptight and whatnot. So,
living in another state, I've learned we are not really.
Yeah.
Popular.
And why we have traffic, I don't know. I'm sorry. That's one thing I'm still trying to figure this out. All these years I lived. Well, yeah, but so are others like states and stuff, but.
Our roads are so, in comparison, the roads are not big enough for how many people that actually live here.
Like, that's true.
And people don't know how to drive, especially coming up the hill. They don't know how to drive.
I will say this, though.
Turn.
I will say this. We are not the worst driving state in the U.S., so I will not state which state is the worst, but just know we are definitely not the worst. We're not the best either.
I've been to one of them.
I visit one often. So they can't drive to save their life. They just can't. But I will say, from the states that I had visited, New Yorkers have the best drivers out there. I don't know how they do it. With all that traffic, and I never been to Chicago, so I wouldn't know, but I'm almost positive that it's the same. It's like, I don't know how you guys do it, but man, if you can drive in New York, you can drive anywhere.
Chicago, you got one-way streets all the way up there. If you don't turn where you need to turn, you have to go all the way up and background?
No, I'm good. But back to the story. So anyway, so he loved California. So he made a friend named Claude, and they became extremely close, like BFFs, right? I mean, it was to the point where Gordon knew the family. He would often visit them and he would have dinner with them. And it was just, he was very close to them. Soon, Gordon started getting interest in Claude's little brother, Philip. So now we don't know Philip's age, unfortunately, at this time. But Gordon started to give in to his thoughts. Now, we're not sure if this is the first time that Gordon had given in to his thoughts, but according to reports, that was the first time. So right now we're going to go based on that alone. So pardon if any misinformation or anything. So yeah. Okay. At the time, Philip, he didn't really realize what was going on until he was older. And then that's when he realized, oh shoot, like this happened to me. And no one really knows how long this was going on for. But once Philip's family, they had found out what was going on, they reported Gordon to the police, which they should have, He was arrested and charged with statutory rape, but for unknown reason, the charges were later dropped and taken off his criminal record. There goes our fine LAPD for you, and there's to this day, there's still cases up like that, which is just, and just a quick little note, Gordon was known as a pathological liar. I just wanted to make a note of that. Just keep that, put it in the back of your head for now. He was a pathological liar. So for this reason, they had to move away from Philip and the family. And obviously, Claude and Gordon were no longer friends because of this. Gordon was actually heartbroken. He would constantly talk about Philip, like if he was his actual lover, like he was legit heartbroken. He kept drawings that Philip would make for him, and he would remember Philip's favorite song. Keep that in mind. You'll understand why I say that towards the end of the episode. By this time, all the friends that Gordon did make, they kind of just stepped away from him. They stopped talking to him for obvious reasons. Gordon felt that he needed to do something with himself. So he had talked to his dad, his parents, if you will, and he convinced them to help him start a business. He wanted to buy a plot of land in Wineville, California, and start a chicken farm. His dad, he liked this idea because he's going to do something with his life finally. He's going to be someone and make something of himself, right? So after they bought the land in Wineville, California, Gordon's nephew, Sanford, he came down from Canada to help build up the farm and build the home and everything, all that stuff. So once everything was done, Sanford was taken back to Canada, and Gordon had convinced his mother, or Gordon's sister, to let Sanford come back home with him, to have him stay there, so that way he could educate him and make a man out of him and everything. Mind you, Gordon at the time was 23, 24. He was barely a man, but then again, times were different then. So Sanford, he did not want to come back. And he begged his mom and his dad, please, I don't want to leave. Let me stay. And he even tried to get his sister, Jessie, to help him out. And this is his older sister, mind you. And they did everything in their power to try to convince their mother to not allow Sanford to go back to back to Wineville with his uncle, Gordon. But at the end of the day, Sanford ended up going back to California. And that's when Sanford's worst nightmares would begin. The same night that Sanford arrived back to the farm, Gordon had beaten Sanford. Sanford had never known his uncle to be abusive. He was always loving and flamboyant, so he was very shocked. Now, this is, mind you, according to reports, okay? This was the first of many to come. Sanford soon learned how to ease his abuser, if you will, how to go with the flow, so his abuse wasn't as bad. He realized that if he didn't talk too much, or if he stayed as quiet as he could, or he wouldn't piss his uncle off. And then he would still be abused, but just not so much, because Gordon would always find a reason to abuse him. Eventually, the physical abuse turned sexual. It got to the point where Gordon would use foreign objects on Sanford. And when he was finished, he would whisper to Sanford's ear and say, well, better stick to the devil you know.
In other words, it's better that it's someone
You know,
than
than
going
someone
out.
else.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause
Which
someone
honestly,
eventually is
it's
going to do it.
exactly. So you're better off doing it with the devil you know, which is just
Yeah.
not okay, you guys. It's definitely not. Gordon would sometimes force Sanford to beat himself. Like Gordon would tell Sanford to beat him. But the thing is, if Sanford, like he would beat him for sexual pleasure, Gordon's sexual pleasure, but if Sanford hurt him, he would just beat the crap out of him because he hurt him, but even though he asked him to, which, yeah. He would threaten Sanford that if he escaped or if he said anything to anybody, he would call immigration on him and that he would be sent to jail and he would be put to death. And, he's 13 years old at this time. Sanford, he's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. And he didn't know the law. So of course he believed it, Sanford was also forced to do all the farming work. He tended to the chickens. He made all the meals. He did all the chores. And even after all that, Gordon would particularly starve him. Like he would not feed him off. He would basically eat everything. He would go for seconds or whatever and just leave him whatever was left, if there was anything left. And because he was so malnourished, Sanford, he didn't grow much and he started losing some of his hair and things like that. At first, Sanford, he had to sleep on the floor, and then eventually he would go to the couch and stuff. And Gordon, he did promise his sister that he would enroll Sanford into school so he can get an education and grow up to be a man. He did not do that. He did not enroll him in school or nothing. He did force him to work around the farm. He would also force Sanford to write letters back to his family saying hey, I'm doing okay. Everything is fine. School is great. I'm learning a lot. Uncle is great, blah, 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 blah. All that jazz. He was forced to do that. So naturally, his mother, Louise, Gordon's sister, had no reason to believe or suspect any foul play. And at this time, Gordon would end up picking up homeless young boys and soliciting them for sex, basically human trafficking. When Gordon would beat and abuse Sanford and the other boys, he would normally do it inside the chicken coop. He would never do it in the house. One night after abusing Sanford, he left him there in the chicken coop at night. So Sanford, he was being so bad, he was out of it. But when he woke up, he was still kind of in a daze. So he did notice that the gate to the chicken coop was unlocked, which is very, very rare. That's the kind of stuff did not happen. Gordon would literally lock it. So he managed to get up and he dragged himself to the front gate of the property. But because he was in so much pain and he knew he wasn't going to make it far. And amongst other things, he just decided it's not worth it. I'm in the middle of the desert. It's just not worth it, So he ended up going back and he fell asleep on the couch inside the house. He was awakened by Gordon pouring hot water on him, and then he beat the crap out of him for trying to escape. So Sanford didn't understand how he found out, because Gordon technically was asleep when it happened, as far as he was concerned, but he was awakened with the boiling hot water, which did leave him scarred and blistering for weeks after that. So, and mind you, this went on for 2 years. You know what I mean? So Gordon dragged him outside and he made him dig this giant hole and he forced him in there. And then he covered the hole with wooden planks and basically made it a prison for him. And he stood there for days without food and without water. And that was his reality for 2 years. That's the kind of torture that he experienced, unfortunately, in his uncle's ranch. So let's talk about the first known victim of Gordon Northcott. So go ahead and take this one.
So the first known victims in 1927, Gordon started setting his sights on other victims. He basically wanted fresh, something fresh, because, his nephew wasn't good enough. One day of the same year, Gordon had gone to the park. There he saw a young boy by the name Junior. Gordon started talking to Junior. Keep in mind, Junior had strayed away from his family at this point. So basically, he's nowhere near them. Gordon started getting weird in his conversation. He had asked Junior if he could tickle him, and Junior said no, which, good job.
Yeah.
He started feeling weird about this conversation and started walking away to look for his family. Gordon ran after him and convinced Junior to go to his car by telling him he has a puppy in the car.
It's always that.
Yep. Since he was a young boy, Junior believed him. I mean, he's
a kid.
easily, you can tell young kids a lot of things and they'll believe you, like Santa Claus and Easter Bunny.
Exactly.
So that's when Gordon grabbed him and tried to force him in his car, but Junior managed to escape and ran to his family. Junior's father took out a penknife and ran after Gordon, but Gordon got away. Because of this experience, Gordon was a bit shaken up and didn't attempt anything for a few months. So it scared him that he was like, I'm just going to lay off.
Yeah, he almost got caught. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I need to lay off and come up with a better execution.
Exactly.
And 6 months later, Gordon had left to visit his parents for a few days, leaving Sanford alone. He knew Sanford wanted to escape because he feared Gordon, which it's obviously sad. Yeah. When Gordon returned, Sanford said he came back in a great mood, which Sanford thought was odd. Gordon had a bucket in his hands. He walked up to Sanford and told him to look in. He assumed it was roadkill in the bucket and told him to take another look. When he did, he realized he was staring at a severed head. Gordon bragged about how he killed a boy in self-defense, that the boy was trying to kill him first. Really? So he shot him first and then decapitated him. He did say that he decapitated him so that he couldn't identify his body and that he actually had the rest of the body in the back of the car. Sanford now realized what his uncle was capable of. He felt that if he did anything to anger Gordon, he would be next. Gordon told Sanford to build a bonfire and to take the severed head and burn it. Because they couldn't create a fire hot enough to cremate the skull, Gordon ended up smashing it with his axe. He kept the body in his car. Then he later took the body and tossed it over a bridge. The body was found the next day because Gordon decapitated him. They couldn't identify the body, and to this day, his remains are unidentified. The only thing that the coroner could tell was that he was possibly Mexican. So they dubbed him the Headless Mexican. That's
to this day, that's still his name, the Headless Mexican, because no one ever came out and claimed him.
Yeah, that's wow. He has been known by that name this entire time. After this, Gordon took Sanford to visit Gordon's parents so he could have an alibi. Once there, Gordon did confess to the murder, but of course he claimed it was self-defense. His mother praised him for defending, and particularly excused his action because in her eyes he could do no wrong. Now, my son is my baby. He can do no wrong. But if he fucks up, I'm going to be the first one to whoop his ass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same here. Like, I have one son, and I love him to death. But no, absolutely not.
That's unexcusable. But of course, this family, they're like on the level. There. No, they're on the same level as like Texas Chainsaw Massacre type of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. Big time.
Like, I could not imagine. So Gordon first worked at a grocery store that was near where Walter lived. So it was possible that they knew each other, so Walter could have felt comfortable. I mean, from what I've seen in the movie, the way he would pick the kids up is by telling them, oh, your parents, they're in the hospital, or your mom got sick or hurt, and you need to come with me so I can take you there to them because they asked me to pick you up because I was close to what happened. And that is very understandable as to why these children could have, if he knew them, he could have, they felt comfortable with him. I mean, it also did state in the movie the nephew was in the car and he was kind of the child bait that, oh, there's a kid in the car already.
Yeah.
So, well, he's not going to hurt us because that kid's okay. So let's, yeah, I'll do it. Okay. I mean, now my kids, they'll scream stranger danger like,
Which for the record, anybody watching out there, if there just happen to be any kids watching out there, do not fall for that. What I do with my kids, I have a password. So if somebody goes up to them and say, hey, I'm here to pick you up, they need to know that password. And usually when I do send, which is hardly ever done, but when I do send someone to pick up the kids because I can't be there, I will text my children, hey, I'm sending this person to pick you up. And it's someone that I know for a fact they know. I will never send a stranger that they're not 100% familiar with, to pick them up because of that reason. And they have the password. And I always tell them, ask them for the password. Or if they say, oh, well, this is what happened. They got into a car accident and I'm here to pick you up. Nope. Go straight back to the school or wherever it is. I go into a crowded, make noise. Always make noise. It's okay to be loud, even to say, hey, we're going to hurt you if you make noise. They're going to hurt you anyways. Make noise.
Yep.
Make it known like, hey, do what you got to do. Make it clear. I see you. I'm not falling for your crap. Do not believe
Pull
when
your
someone
phone out,
tells you that.
Record them.
Exactly.
That's why I
call
tell
your
my
parents.
Kids.
Yeah. Call your parents. Be like, oh, let me call them. Oh, you can't because of this reason. Well, let me call anyways. And they keep insisting that. Then obviously it's BS, and always, always, always keep an eye on your surroundings. Know what's going on in your surroundings. Cause I cannot stress enough, like human trafficking, you guys, it is such a real thing. Do not just go wandering off. It's not a joke. It's out there. It happens all the time.
In the high desert, there's a ring up here at the Walmart by our house because me and Vetty, we live right down the street from each other. The Walmart by our house, there is a ring. They have been people arrested twice in 2 instances that are connected to the sex trafficking ring. That's home. This is at home for us.
This is our home. And I'm glad you brought that up for this reason. If you think about it, we live in the high desert. Okay. We're not going to disclose where exactly. We just know that we live it up here. The high desert is a variety. It's a huge area. It's a vast, but it's huge. So thinking about it, thankfully we're in residential areas. I will say that, but there's still so much desert out there. Once upon a time, Mira Loma was Wineville. Wineville was the high desert where we're at. So imagine this going on. What on earth is going on in homes that we are not that, because there's so many homes here that you will have to drive to get to your next neighbor's house. We don't know what goes on there. We don't know what's really in the desert because no one's going in there. You know what I mean? So it's very scary thinking about that. That's why I'm on my kids as much as I possibly can. And I tell them, text me when you're on your way home or whatever the case is. And I do check their phone. There's so many inconsistencies with that. I get that. But at the same time, I do my best to protect them and for them to watch out for themselves because one day my children will be adults and they will have to take care of themselves. But I want them to know, hey, this world is cruel. This world is ugly. There's so much evil in it. Clearly, we're covering one case of it. But there's also beauty in it. You got to find that beauty, but you got to keep your eye out, especially nowadays. It's like it gets worse by the decade, if you will, But let's continue on about how he claimed that he did it, but who knows, So go ahead and take over.
Okay, so when Sanford was talking to the police, he said that Gordon had several victims, one of them being Walter Collins. He said that Gordon took him when he was on his way home from the movies, which, if they were a good force, they would not have released information about the movies out to the whole world. That way, that's something only the killer could know. I don't know. Maybe you know if they released it, and if anyone watching this knows,
I
let
don't know,
us
to be
know.
honest. Yeah,
Let
comment
us
down
know.
below.
Yes, comment. Let us know, because this is stuff. There should be case sensitive stuff that only the victim and the killer should know. So the movies would have been big, right? Only the killer, the mom, and the victim would have known that. So he said that Gordon picked him up on the way home from the movies and then brought him to the chicken farm and took him to one of the chicken coops. Sanford said that the main reason why he built the chicken coop so he can take his victims and abuse them there. Now, keep in mind, he didn't want to bring them into the house and do this stuff in his house. So 99.9% of the time it was done out in the open. And no, he did not have neighbors. No, it wasn't stacked track houses. It was here and in between.
Right, but real quick, I don't mean to interrupt. And one thing that I did read in the reports, there was neighbors, but they were a distance away. Like you were saying, they're not right, they were at earshot. You know what I mean? They could hear screams and stuff, but keep in mind, this is the 1920s. Hard physical discipline was normal back then. Like you could beat the crap out of your kid. It was considered normal back then. So they kind of just wanted to mind their own business, according to reports.
Yeah, that's like the kitty, I forget her last name, where she was murdered out in the open. People heard that she was being murdered and didn't call. The Kitty Genovese story. Mm-hmm. She was murdered out on the stoop of a building, and nobody, this was in a time, you didn't say something, you see something, you didn't say something. Like today, now, you see something, you say something.
Something, exactly.
No. So for, people that are like, oh, well, people heard it, why didn't they call? Because you could have said, like, if you've seen The Silence of the Lambs, you kill a lamb and it sounds like a child screaming. I mean, there's so many things. Being a farmer, you can blame that on. Or you were using a saw. It's not like a child screaming, but it was just a saw, right? There are so many things you can put the blame on if you don't have the evidence in eye shot, because a cop can only fingertip to fingertip spread out your wingspan. A cop can only check in that vicinity without a warrant. So whatever they see, that's what they see. Anything outside of that, from what I may be wrong, but from what I've learned, fingertip to fingertip of your wingspan, front and back, that's all they can look around. They can't go in your house. They can't go search without a warrant. With that being said, Stanford said that the main reason why he built the chicken coop was to take his victims there and to abuse them. He would live in his home and have his captives stay out in the chicken coops. Once Gordon brought Walter home and threw him in one of the chicken coops, he immediately started assaulting him. After he had finished, he locked him in and went inside his house. So it was basically chicken coops of hell. It was
basically, there was chickens there. He did have some farm animals, mainly more chickens and stuff, but most of the chicken coops were used for
abuse.
Torture. Here's the thing, though. Yeah, here's one thing that wasn't put in the reports, at least that I saw, and I'll explain where I got this information from. He would put chickens in certain chicken coops. And then he would he would have Sanford take the chickens out and then put his victim or Sanford in there and abuse them. And then after he was finished with them and took them out, whatever, he would put the chickens back. Of course, he would clean up the place and stuff, but he would put the chickens back in there.
Because chickens could carry evidence of blood or feces.
Exactly.
Or whatever a dead body may exit.
Exactly.
So Stanford was making dinner the entire time that But later that night, Sanford said he could hear the boy screaming and crying for help. He wanted to help him, but was so afraid of what his uncle would do to him. I mean, this boy knew everything, right? The boy knew what the uncle was capable of and how to get away with it because he had gotten away with it for so long. After a while, Gordon started focusing on Walter rather than Sanford. He felt very conflicted because on one hand, Sanford wasn't being abused, but on the other hand, the reason why he wasn't being abused was because someone else was. So basically, he didn't know whether to be happy or sad because he was no longer the object of his abuse. Walter was. So it was, am I happy or am I sad? Because this shouldn't be happening. He knew it shouldn't be happening, but what could he do? But if he let Walter go,
it would go back to him.
And who knows? It could have been even worse if he let him
Exactly.
go.
Exactly.
So he felt so bad that he was too afraid to help him, and the most he could do is relieve some of his suffering by telling him that if he just stays quiet and does not fight it, it will be over soon. This went on for weeks. It wasn't a couple days, okay, and you're let go. I mean, even a couple days of that would...
Even a couple hours of that, even a couple minutes of that, like, just no.
Going from a loving home where your mama is spoiling you and loving you and you have all this love surrounding you, to go from that to this harsh environment where you're being abused and raped and just your innocence being ripped out of your body, just like it's a piece of trash you throw away. His innocence was raped and pulled from his body. One day, Gordon's parents came to visit as a surprise. Gordon, not knowing this, was in the middle of assaulting Walter when they pulled up. Sanford saw them and took this opportunity to expose Gordon, but had to be smart about it. When Louise asked Sanford where Gordon was, he told her that he was in the chicken coop. Louise then goes and catches Gordon in the act. She spent the rest of the day scolding him, and of course he was crying like a baby because this was his first time she ever yelled at him. This gave Sanford hope. Louise made him promise that he would never do something like this again. Gordon promised to return Walter to his family and apologized to them for what he had done. That's when Louise changed her mind. She promised not to report him as long as he kept his promise about not doing this again. However, she feared that if she returned Walter, his family would report him, and she couldn't have that. Oh, heaven forbid.
Right.
So she came up with the plan that they would all kill Walter. So that way no one could tell anyone. I mean... to take the life of a little boy.
9 years old, keep in mind. 9. That's younger than our boys.
To take that. My youngest is 10. To take that from a child because...
after being abused for weeks.
That... I could not imagine what is going through his head and what he's feeling, and just like I picture like him just crying, I want my mom. And then I'm like, okay. Gordon was happy with the plan, but Sanford wasn't. He felt he couldn't say no to them since they were willing to kill this boy and had already known about killing another one. What were the odds they wouldn't turn on him? So he was scared they would even kill. I mean, yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Because they already did it. I mean, Gordon already did it. And the mom was like, oh, good boy, basically. So it's like, well, they're going to kill him. What makes me think they won't do it to me? Look at what he's already doing to me, you know? Yeah. And once I talk about the book, it's going to get into much more details about it, but it would explain his fear. It takes it to a different level that I was not ready for, which I will get to later on about that.
Yeah. Whew. This is just
It's
insane.
a lot. I know it's a lot.
It is. While Walter was passed out on the floor, Gordon picked up an axe and began to swing at Walter. He then handed the axe to Sanford. Sanford froze in fear, but Luis urged him to do it. He then took a few swings. Luis took the axe from Sanford and finished the job. Gordon then ordered Sanford to dig a hole so they could bury Walter. The next day, Luis was getting ready to leave. But before she did, she reminded Gordon of the promise he made her, and that was only reason why she would help him was because of his promise. He obviously didn't keep his promise because not that long later, the Winslow brothers had disappeared. So they killed Walter for no reason.
Basically.
Thinking,
it was all for nothing.
Yeah, all that. And Christine Collins' lifelong search for her son for no reason. All this happened because people are sick. Allegedly, Gordon saw them walking home while he was driving around. He approached the boys, started talking about chickens. He told the boys they could come live with them and help take care of the chickens. The brothers loved the idea. So they got in the car. Once the boys were with him, he threw them in the chicken coop. Soon after, he started assaulting them. He got a little nervous because he did take the boys because they came from a wealthy family. They weren't, we talked about this, I think, was it the last episode?
The last episode, the first one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first one about the status. So he made the boys write the letter to the family, but he couldn't shake off the anxiety and stress. He felt it wasn't worth keeping the boys. He took the same axe he used on Walter and made Sanford go into Lewis's coop and told him, this time, you go first. He then made Sanford swing at Lewis before he took the axe to finish the job. The two went into Nelson's coop and killed him. Unfortunately, the two boys did not die right away. Gordon ordered Sanford to dig graves for each of the boys. They were still alive as they watched Sanford digging their graves. So they had to watch their graves where they were going to be buried, be dug up. Sanford said he remembered noises when they fell in the grave. So not only did they watch, they were buried alive. They were not dead. They were buried alive. After that, nothing else really happened except Gordon went back to abusing Sanford, but because he was so confident in how to abuse and harm children, his abuse went to another level due to his confidence level. He did more evasive things, basically. To satisfy his urge for killing, he volunteered at homeless shelters to look for his next victims. He found a family that was in desperate need and offered them a job on the farm. They were so excited that they were getting help. He took the family to the farm to give them a tour. Gordon kept hinting to Sanford that he was going to do the family mean
do him in. Yeah.
Sanford gathered the courage and started telling Gordon, this is too risky because once the family goes missing, they will be traced back to the homeless shelter. And they will know that they came here to the farm. Though he was right, Gordon didn't appreciate that he called him out. In other words, how dare you tell me what could happen? I already know. Basically, he didn't care. He ended up beating Sanford for telling him how it was, and even locked him in the chicken coop, planning to leave him there for the rest of the night. After all that, Gordon kept thinking about what Sanford said and came to the conclusion that he was right. It was too much of a risk. So all that for what? For what?
Exactly.
He fired the parents that same night and took them back to the shelter. So you give hope to this family just to, by the way, fuck off.
Exactly.
His next potential victim was Stephen Black, a 15-year-old boy that he had an eye on. However, he couldn't just grab him like he did his other victims. He planned to do the same thing he did with his first victim, Philip. So he became friends with Stephen's family and they loved him. And it would have taken a while, but he felt it was worth it. So in other words, he groomed him just like he did
was
Philip.
Grooming him. Exactly. Yep. And one thing I do want to say that according to like the research that I did and even the book, Gordon was very cocky, very confident, like just your typical narcissistic. Like he just thought he was smarter than everyone, that he was better than everybody. He just, even if you see his pictures, you could just see like just the cockiness of him and how just like, whatever, I'm so confident, I'm better, I'm smarter, everyone's an idiot but me type thing, you know? So he didn't like to be called out. And that's mainly because his mom never told him no and never told him he was wrong. But it's like, no. You know, don't do that. All right. So we will end it there. This will be the end of part 2 of the Wineville Chicken Coop murders. So if you have not watched part 1, please go back and watch this. And, you know, or if you need a refresher, please rewatch it and everything. If you have any questions or, you know, just tell us what you think about this so far. Please comment down below. Please like and follow on YouTube and on Spotify. Subscribe. Definitely subscribe. So also don't forget to check out Dawn's Twitch page and go ahead, give us that info, Dawn.
That's twitch.com/Dunderballs with a Z. That's DUNDERBALLZ, where I will be diving into the world of Warcraft, playing some PS5, Gotham Knights, maybe Tetris if I'm bored, and hopefully getting into some true crime where Miss Vetty will be a guest where we'll play video games and do true crime.
Ooh, play video games and talk about scary stuff too. Ooh. Definitely go check her out. I will link her down below for that. And that is it for now. Don't forget to also check us out on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. That's Dark Mystery Podcast, or Twitter, which is Venom for the Soul, the number 4 for the Soul. So, and that would be, if you want to be a guest or let me know what you want us to talk about next time, go ahead and send me an email as well or comment it down below. But the email is darkmysterypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we truly appreciate it. Don't forget to tune in for part 3 next week, and we'll see you there. Bye.